All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Marlins Prospect Report. I'm here with Joe Frisaro. My name is David Fernandez. We're on the Five Reasons Sports YouTube channel, and this is our second episode of the Prospect Show. Five Reasons Sports and a man on second, kind of combo effort here. I've got Joe with me today, and we're going to talk all things Marlins prospects. How you doing, Joe?
Doing great, David. And last week, we had really positive feedback. I was very excited. I think we got a lot of good content ahead of you. Like you said, is a Five Reasons man on second production, right? And we look forward to it. And before we get rolling, we also look forward to dugout mugs. David's put in the bottom of the crawler there. You got dugoutmugs.com/man on to ND. Hit that link if you like what we're doing. This is the aluminum bat. David, they make these in minor leagues as well. I'm going to have to get a jumbo shrimp or something mug, and we'll get people, because you could get your favorite dugout mug there. You got yours in the mail yet, my friend?
It's on the way. It is on the way. I got to get a jumbo shrimp one though, because they've won 5 in a row. They've been pretty good so far.
Yeah. And you were there last night, and we're not going to waste more of your time here. And obviously, last night, Max Meyer's always a show when he's there, but a little extra buzz up in Jacksonville. Tell us why, David.
Oh yeah, we had a very interesting matchup yesterday. Ronald Acuna Jr., two-time All-Star of the Atlanta Braves, was starting his rehab stint with the Gwinnett Stripers. He showed up yesterday when word got out that Acuna Jr. was coming to Jacksonville for this series. They were telling me yesterday when I got there, the media guys were telling me that their ticket requests went through the roof. They ended up having more than 5,000 people there, wow, which is about 1,500 more than what the Oakland Athletics drew in their home game yesterday, which is a little crazy considering this is AAA, right? But the headline matchup there, the main event was Meyer versus Acuna, and Meyer, he looked pretty good. He held his own against Acuna, although Acuna did get his hands on one of Meyer's fastballs and nearly deposited it in right center field. If not for this protruding wall that they have up in right center field here in Jacksonville, that would have been a solo shot. Instead, it ended up being a double. But Meyer looked really good, and Ronald Acuna, he looks ready to go. He's not going to be in AAA for very long.
Yeah, that's kind of special. You never know when you get a young star like Acuna or any major leaguer on rehab assignment, and so people know. David's up there in St. Augustine. He's going to be at the Jumbo Shrimp a lot, being able to see the Acunas and when the prospects of these other teams get into town as well as the Marlins and talk about Max. I mean, we know Max is super close, and he's probably ready for the big leagues. The Marlins made the decision; they want him in the rotation, not the bullpen, and there's not a rotation spot for him. And I'm of the belief too, there's no such thing as too much development. So might as well get him at least a month or two, because you never know. He may be here before we know it. But in the meantime, he's building up. He was pitching into the 6th inning, I believe, last night.
Yeah, he went. It was a season high for him in terms of innings pitched. He went 5 2/3 yesterday. Came out after a couple strikeouts in the 6th inning, and he didn't have his best stuff yesterday. He was still very, very good. He, scoreless. He hasn't given up a run in, I think it's 11 1/3 innings. He's just been really, really solid, but he didn't have like the precise command that he had the other night in Durham when he took a perfect game through 5 innings. He ended up, he pitched 5 2/3 innings yesterday. And he ended up throwing 85 pitches. He got 16 whiffs along the way. His, and again, it was mostly his command, his placement. He left the fastball up to Acuna, but that was really the only loud hit that he gave up. He only surrendered 3 hits. He walked a couple guys. The problem for him yesterday was he was falling behind hitters regularly, and the slider was moving. He ended up getting 7 strikeouts, but he was making Nick Fortes work behind the plate because he was burying that slider in the dirt, and Fortes, he was blocking most of it. But he looked, it was a solid outing, which is encouraging because he didn't have his best stuff, which is, one of those things that you want to see. Obviously, with the all-star level talent in the lineup with Acuna, he did well against him for the most part. So it was an encouraging outing for Meyer.
Could you tell if he looked Max is an emotional kid anyway. He's a fighter. He's a no one believes in me, I'm going to prove everyone wrong type of personality. Do you sense that he knew that? Obviously, you knew Acuna was in the game. Do you sense that he got a little bit amped up? Did he seem to be, overthrowing against Acuna, or did he seem poised? How did you kind of see his demeanor in those showdowns?
Well, it's funny you say that. The first pitch that he threw, first pitch of the night, was 95 up and in to Acuna, and the whole crowd, like you heard the ooh, like kind of wash through the place, But for the most part, he seemed to be relatively in control from an emotional perspective. I mean, he wasn't, he didn't look frustrated too much, right? It didn't seem like the moment got to him at all. He just wasn't able to locate. He kept one thing I noticed last night, he kept tossing balls away. So maybe, it was sweaty. He was working on, like, the grip maybe wasn't there for him last night. He kept, discarding balls from the catcher and from the umpires. And he did that, I'm going to say, probably upwards of half a dozen times, if not more than that, throughout the course of his outing. So, he hit 95 pretty regularly with his fastball. I don't think he got up much higher than that. At least I didn't notice if he did. And again, the slider was working. His changeup was working pretty well yesterday too. In the final at bat against Acuna, following the double, Acuna came up for the third time against him, and he went in with a fastball and he placed it pretty well. Acuna kind of fought it off. He fouled it off, and then he followed that with a changeup that Acuna just pounded right into the ground to third base, which was good to see, because he had fallen behind. In the previous at bat, he fell behind 3-0 to Acuna, which ultimately led to the loud double. I think it was in the third inning at that point. So he looked pretty good. He was working hard. Again, 7 strikeouts, came out after 5 2/3 innings. All in all, a pretty good outing for him.
Yeah, and I tell you what I'm going to be looking for with Max, and a lot of people are saying that the changeup's going to define whether he's a starter or how quickly he gets to the big leagues. But I'm going to keep an eye on this too, his fastball. If guys are hitting that fastball, if it's getting on guys, I know the velocity is there, normally 95, 97 in that neighborhood with him. We know he has a plus fastball by the scouting grade, but I think that's going to be big for him. If he could get outs with that fastball, get swings and misses with that fastball, because if he can do that and locate it, like you were saying, that will set up that slider, because that could always bail him out. But that's what I'm going to keep an eye on with Max. I'm more concerned about his fastball and how that's playing than his other 2 pitches, because the slider right now that's like I said, that's his out pitch. The changeup's going to a work in progress, and that's going to be fine. So we're going to keep an eye on that. But before the game, you happen to catch up with JJ Bleday. Obviously, he's not having the greatest start. Tell us what you saw and what he said.
Yeah, I sat down with JJ Bleday for about 10 minutes yesterday prior to the game, right after he took BP. He was in that first group with the Jumbo Shrimp. He was there with Leiwan and Peyton Burdick, Fortes, Willens Astudillo was in that first group. And, I sat down with him. We spoke a little bit. He was talking about his approach. And I had asked him if anything had changed between like AA to AAA or coming off a fall league and things like that. And he says that he hasn't changed his approach, but what he's done, he says that he's getting away from his approach. And his approach has always been a disciplined one and sort of selectively aggressive. The discipline is key for him, because when he gets ahead in the count, he's hitting 375 with a 722 on base percentage, which is spectacular. But when he falls behind, or, he's giving at-bats away, which is something that he mentioned, then that's where those struggles are. But he feels very confident moving forward, because he kind of had similar struggles last season. He said, it's early in the year. I've been here before. I just have to keep swinging it and trusting the approach, trust getting something in the zone. And today he went 1 for 4 today with a double. And the double probably gets out in a lot of minor league stadiums. He had a good swing last night too. He didn't have a hit last night. He did get on base. He's been on base 7 games in a row, which is a great figure for him. So even though he's not necessarily getting the hits and his average is obviously down, he's still contributing, and his swing it looks like it's getting there, right? He's keeping his his hands are low. He's moving through. He's like trying to stay inside the ball. So it's getting there. I wouldn't be surprised if he has a breakout relatively quickly.
Well, let's hope so. We're pulling for JJ. He's had his inconsistencies, to say the least. I can't even read my writing, David, but I think I wrote down 32 plate appearances coming into today.
That sounds right. Yeah.
Okay, I couldn't tell if it's 32 or 52, but I was going to point this out because I had a scout friend of mine. I asked him about Bleday, and because I think he's going to struggle with velocity. Especially up and in, because that's where there's a hole in his bat path there. But the scout noted that he's got very elite eyes, like in terms of seeing pitches. And going to today, 17.3 walk rate.
Yeah.
To a 23-1 K rate, which isn't terrible. So that's encouraging. That I think he's going to make enough contact, and then hopefully for his sake and the Marlins that results in a little better BABIP and whatnot. But I think he came in today hitting 146. Again, we're not going to panic over 32 plate appearances, but you like to see the consistency of an approach. And but again, keep an eye on that walk rate, because that could help him out a lot. And as we go, we're going to talk a little bit in a minute about there's a little more magnifying on JJ. For the fact that they took him fourth in the 2019 draft out of Vanderbilt. Obviously, he was like one of the college players of the year. I think he led the nation in batting average, and they went to the finals again. Vandy. They didn't take Riley Green or C.J. Abrams, who went 5 and 6 respectively behind him. And I remember having discussions with people back then, and they were all knocking Green and Abrams because they were high school kids, and they were like, you take the college guy because he could reach the big leagues faster. We can't wait anymore on high school kids, which this organization has nothing but success with high school kids, with Beckett being number 2 overall, with Stanton, with Jose Fernandez, with Yelich, with Real Muto. I mean, they've had a ton of success with high school kids. I'm of the belief, David, you take the best player. And when C.J. Abrams is already in the big leagues and Riley Green probably makes the Tigers opening day roster if he doesn't foul a ball off his foot and break it at almost the last day of spring training, and believe it or not, in that at-bat still tripled with a broken foot, that kind of puts a little more magnifying JJ Bleday. And what's your thought on that? Like I said, I don't care if you go you want a guy in the big leagues. I'm always about taking the higher end tools player they take the better player regardless.
Yeah, listen, I'm with you in that respect in terms of, best player available, especially in baseball where it's not necessarily like the NFL draft, right? Where you're trying to fill needs for the very next season. In baseball, it's obviously very, very different. These guys need some time to develop through the minor league system. And when you look back at the track record with some of the college selections that they've made, particularly in that first round, you worry a little bit. I mean, Max Meyer was one, and he's on the cusp of making the bigs, right? But JJ, I guess the thing to remember about him, he lost all of 2020, right? As so many minor leaguers did. So he lost out on an entire year of development. And then, it's just been a work in progress. And, one of the things that some of the Jacksonville media guys were saying yesterday is it seems like some of these prospects are blocked. Right, especially when you think about what's going on with the Marlins and with the outfielders that they've signed and things like that. Maybe the path for some of these guys has been blocked, and you wonder a little bit about JJ's getting to the majors. He does need more time. He needs to figure out what's going on with his swing and consistently produce at the plate. He's been fine defensively. He's good when he gets on the base paths. He's talking about wanting to improve his base running, and he wants to start stealing bags and things like that. It's just a matter of getting those hits. You mentioned the batting average and balls in play. He's only hitting 179 with batting average and balls in play. That's really low. I mean, so some of it's bad luck, and he's even had a home run robbed. It happened in that Durham series last week. So there is some pressure on him. But at that high in, you're talking about the MLB draft, I think you do. You should lean more towards talent, which is obviously what the Marlins have done since then, taking Max Meyer, even though he was a college guy, but then, last year
with Green,
taking
is
Khalil
it Watson? Yeah,
Watson
Khalil
and Joe
Watson.
Mack,
Yeah.
So we'll see, I guess, how it develops for him. But there is pressure there, and I think he does feel that pressure. And there's even some internal pressure with some of the other prospects there in Jacksonville, because they've got some guys that are right on the cusp of making that leap. Even guys like Leiwan Diaz, who's been up in the show and probably should be, with the team, considering his production. It's a weird dynamic, but it's for him. He's got a clear sort of development path in terms of like what he needs to do next in order to take that next step.
Yeah, I agree. And again, he's a great kid. He's been nothing but courteous to me and obviously to you. And we're pulling for him. But this is, it's the big leagues. It's the highest end when there's a lot of pressure to be the number 4 pick in the draft. But I think more of the big picture. And yes, teams miss, all teams miss players. But, everyone handles pressure differently. Everyone's time clock's different. But I still think this should be a reminder not to fall into any traps, any preconceived notions. Maybe there were teams back in the Moneyball day where take the college guy, don't even scout him, just look at the computer and it tells you who just line up your draft that way. But I do think it's really important to not fall into traps in their market. If you could get an elite talent, a CJ Abrams, a Riley Green, you got to recognize that and at least more strongly consider or be open and not just fall into, oh, well, JJ went 5 for 5 against Auburn in the SEC tournament, which with Derek Jeter there, and that seemed to make everyone think this is a done deal, and nobody questioned it. And one thing I do as a veteran journalist, you question. I everything I say here, I question to the faces of the people at the organization. Like, why did you do this? And you get it good. As long as your process is good, that's fine. But I'm also huge on talent and tools, and you got to kind of see it. And sometimes it's not always there on a Fangraphs chart. Right. That's where evaluation comes in. You see swing, you see athleticism, you see growth, you see, because I went back with JJ. I think he was like a 30-something rounder out of high school. Mm-hmm. And then he became 3 years later the 4th overall pick. Well, CJ Abrams was the 6th pick out of high school. He wasn't the 34th. He was the 6th pick. You know what I mean? So, there is history on these players, especially, college guys. Not everyone's like a Jack Leiter who could, basically be a first rounder, but then told everyone he was going to go to Vanderbilt regardless. So I don't even know where he was drafted or if he was drafted, goes to Vandy and was number 2 pick overall, whatever. But not everyone's that fortunate or that skilled. But keep that in mind as we move forward. But you mentioned a player that's knocking on the door, and Lewin Diaz, I mean, just looking at his numbers, you see him in person. I've seen him in person. Just a nice player. 130, weighted runs created plus, 289 just going into today, 377, I think, with on base, I guess. 11.3 walk, just 20.8 K. So I like if you're in the low 20s in your K rate, I can live with that. Over 10 walk rate. Really happy with, lefty power. He could play the position really well. And he's going to make a decision soon enough where the Marlins got to make a call in the big leagues. Aguilar or Cooper, one of them's probably going to have to be traded because I think Lewin's going to force the issue.
Absolutely. And that was something that Mattingly talked about, during spring training. He wasn't talking about Lewin specifically. Actually, he was talking about Bleday and Burdick and this idea of like forcing the issue. And I really do think that Leiwan Diaz is forcing the issue for the Marlins at this point, because he hit another homer today. He hit a 3-run bomb. He is now up to, hold on, let me see if they have the
I had him at 289 last night, so whatever it would go up to.
He went 2 for 3 today. He's at 306 now. He's got 14 RBI, team leading 14 RBI. Although actually Charles LeBlanc may have passed him after the day that he had today, but Diaz he's been spectacular, and he's been, immaculate at first base and, defensively. And at this point, and even again, the media guys in Jacksonville, they don't see the need for any further development for Leiwan. I mean, we see the need for development with Bleday. He has, there are production issues with Bleday and, holes in the swing, as you mentioned. But Leiwan's producing with the bat. He's playing really well defensively, and it's almost, I guess, poor roster construction from a Marlins perspective that you've blocked this guy who probably should be getting reps at first. I mean, if nothing else, he is far and away a better defender than both Cooper and Aguilar at first base. Maybe the Marlins were banking on Cooper getting hurt by now, which is always something, I guess, that's a possibility. But I can't imagine he's here in Jacksonville for much longer.
Yeah, and what you don't want to have happen, because I think it might have happened to him last year, where you get off to a pretty good start, you're ready, and there's no room for you, and then you get bored, for lack of a better word. Jack McKean used to use that word. The guy's up there and he's bored, and next thing you know, he's not producing because he's not challenged anymore, and he doesn't feel like the carrot's there for him to get the next step. So we'll keep an eye on that. We'll see how the big club does, but you never know. Again, the depth's always kind of needed, at the big league level. We'll see how it plays out, but Lewin Diaz, obviously someone to keep an eye. We're going to segue over. Now we're going to, big news I found, I was at the park yesterday, the Marlins, and Edward Cabrera is going on rehab assignment tomorrow, Thursday night. He will be pitching with the low A Jupiter Hammerheads. They'll be facing the St. Lucie Mets, support St. Lucie Mets. I can't imagine Edward's going to spend too much time in Jupiter, but he looked so good in spring, but then got a little bit of a biceps or whatever issue. They backed him off a little bit. I thought he was making a case, even with limited innings, to make the opening day roster. He's certainly there in terms of the talent. Him back on the road to recovery is big for the Marlins.
1,000%. And he's already on the 40-man roster. So, as long as there's no setback between, his start Thursday, I don't know how long he's going to stay in Jupiter. I would imagine he goes from Jupiter to Jacksonville and maybe gets a start or two up here. But since he's on the 40-man, I feel like it's more likely that Cabrera gets to the majors before Meyer does, especially since Meyer's not on the 40-man. I know that they wanted to keep him in Jupiter to keep him close to the medical staff, the training staff, and kind of keep a close eye on him and that, and just kind of ramping him up. I don't imagine that he's going to go very deep into the game on Thursday, but he's, as once his arm is ready, he's another one. Like Leiwan, he's ready to go. I mean, he really shouldn't spend very much time at all this season, beyond just like from a preparation perspective. Once his arm is built up, you call him up. I know that, on opening day, at least opening day for minor leagues, which was a couple days ahead of the majors this year, there was questions around, where is Edward Cabrera? He was supposed to be in Jacksonville, but then he wasn't on their roster and he wasn't there on opening day. And then there was the questions surrounding, the comebacker that hit Eliezer Hernandez. So, things were up in the air with him. Was Cabrera going to start there? But then obviously we found out that he was hurt and he was staying in Jupiter, but for him, it's, again, like Leiwan, it's a matter of time. Once he's built up and ready to go, I don't foresee them, especially since he's already on the 40-man. I don't foresee him being in the minors for much longer.
Yeah, absolutely. He might get 2, maybe 3 starts with the Hammerheads if they wanted to go slowly with him. Let's say he goes 2 innings. I don't know. Maybe they're happy with 25, 30 pitches in the first start. Obviously, health's going to be huge for him. He's dealt with arm issues before. He's an amazingly talented pitcher that, you just hope that the health is there for him. And if it is, I think by the time we get to mid-May, it could be very interesting. Things have a way of sorting itself out. We don't wish anything on anybody, but you never know. Things do happen. And next thing you know, it seems like, Cabrera and Meyer are blocked. Next thing you know, they both could be here. That's how quickly things can turn, but yeah, we wanted to touch on Edward, with the pitching for the Hammerheads. And I tell you this much, if he's on point, it's not going to be a very fun day for low A
No,
batting opponents on that
no,
Port St. Lucie. At Port
certainly
St.
not.
Lucie, around those 19, 20-year-olds may not be ready for that just yet,
Yeah.
but it's enlightening. It's always fun to see the players back in whether it's rehab assignments. This isn't technically a rehab assignment, just so people know.
Right.
He was optioned, so he's not necessarily guaranteed coming back to the big league. So it's just a matter of him, wherever if they want him in Pensacola for a little bit, that's a possibility. Maybe they're just happier with him in Jacksonville, either with the pitching coach, or I'm sure you can find room on the Jumbo Shrimps rotation for Edward Cabrera. Yeah, I don't think he'd be blocked too much there.
No.
And speaking of the Pensacola, probably the most fascinating prospect this year, David, in the Marlins system is Paul McIntosh.
Yeah.
I must admit, up until 2 weeks ago, I'm like, who? And he's really turned heads. 24 years old, a catcher with immense hit ability. What do you know about him? And I'll tell you what I'm hearing about him.
Yeah, so I mean, he kind of just like you, Joe. It's only over the course of the last couple of weeks that we've started to hear his name and see his production. And I mean, he's really sort of forced his way into the conversation in terms of Marlins prospects and things of that nature. He wasn't in the top 30 of the Marlins prospects, from MLB Pipeline. He's gonna be there soon, if nothing else. But yeah, like you said, 24 years old, he's just pounding the ball right now. I mean, he's hitting 438. He's got a 514 on base, 813 slugging. He's got a couple homers. He's got 4 doubles, a triple, 6 RBIs, only 8 strikeouts. He's been really, really impressive with the bat. He's hitting over 500 on balls put in play. So just really, really productive. And somebody
West
that
Virginia,
again, nowhere. Yeah. He was drafted out of high school by the Angels, and then he ended up going to West Virginia instead, like sticking with his commitment there. Played a couple of years. Obviously, the 2020 COVID season didn't have any development there. He signed with the Marlins as an undrafted free agent in 2021. He's got great athleticism. He's got great power as a catcher. They've played him a little bit. He's DH'd obviously too. I think they may have given him a look, or they could be planning to give him a look at first base. I mean, something just to get him in the lineup, because he's somebody that people are continuing to talk about.
No question. And, analytics, sometimes we talk favorably of it, sometimes not so much. This is a huge win for the Marlins analytics department. They discovered him. They discovered the computers more than the eyeballs discovered him, based on hard contact rate, based on comparatively low K rates, doesn't really swing and miss in the zone much. And 37 plate appearances, 21.3 K rate, 16% walk rate. Ridiculous number there. Excuse me. 13.5 walk rate. Last year in A ball, he had the 16 walk rate, and the 21.3 here is 21.6 in Double A. Just so I'm not confused anyone. 6'1", 220. So he's a little bit on the bigger side of a catcher. And I did hear, first base, maybe some left field. This is a guy, but they think they may have a catcher that's an offensive catcher in the mist. There's a lot, hard hit rates very high, and like I said, a lot of contact, with impactful contact, good swing, really fascinating player to watch. If you haven't heard about him, Paul McIntosh. So tearing it up in Pensacola. And, who knows if Fortes gets called up here, if there's anything in the catcher situation, you might be seeing, McIntosh come your way to Jacksonville in the, before the summer's over. And, before we kind of get this thing wrapped up, I did want to talk about Gerard Encarnacion, who's starting to wake up. Gerard has always been a prospect I've been very high on, higher than maybe some of my scout friends. One scout friend I just reminded today is not in on Gerard, thinks that, there's just, he won't hit velocity in this scout friend of mine's opinion. The K rate this year, 34.8, but I believe it's gone way down because his batting average is way up. We're just talking 10 games. I think Encarnacion was one of those victims of COVID, the pandemic. It just shut down development. He's 24 years old. I don't quit on guys that could just basically check swing the ball 400 feet. This guy is that strong. This guy can, he's powerful and he could scare you. And with the universal DH, I think he has a chance to be an interesting DH, first base, outfield type of possibility among the bigger body. Yes, you're a little concerned about the swing and miss, especially handling velocity up. But there's enough mediocre pitching, and I think that there's enough raw talent in Gerard Carnacion that if they wanted to make him trade available, I think a lot of teams, I think would want to take a shot at him as a change of scenery guy. So interesting prospect, in my opinion. Your opinion on Gerard Carnacion?
Oh, incredibly interesting prospect. Like you said, the ballpark can't hold him. He can hit it out of anywhere. And, he's over his last 4 games, we've seen the jump in those numbers because over his last 4 games, he's 9 for 16 with a double, 2 homers, couple RBI. So he's starting to get locked in. You mentioned, he lost all of 2020 to COVID, and then 2021, he was limited to just 63 games because of injury, right? So, it's almost been like 2 seasons of stalled development for him. But he's on the 40-man roster, which is one of the things that makes him really interesting, even though he's in Double-A and he's an outfielder, first base, DH hybrid. He's on the 40-man roster. The Marlins put him there to avoid losing him in the Rule 5 draft. So, if, God forbid there's an injury with the big club, it's easier to promote him all the way from Double-A than to promote somebody like Bleday or Burdick. So it'll be interesting to see how they end up playing out like that. But then the other case too is since he's on the 40-man, maybe he does become a trade sweetener if they do elect to make a move, somewhere, especially, because we're getting to the point where some of these prospects, and we've talked about this a little bit today, they're getting blocked by other players in the system and guys with the big club and the 40-man roster. There's roster churn like with the pitchers, especially on the bottom end of it. But, with a guy like Gerard Carnacion, is he ready for the bigs? He's got like really clear holes in his game, holes in the strike zone that he can't really handle. As you said, velocity up. But he does have a great deal of potential. So it's going to be interesting to see his development and then ultimately how the Marlins move forward with him as a prospect, especially since he's on the 40-man.
Yeah, no question. And like I said, he could go to right field, easily homer, right center, easily homer, turn on the ball. I think he's just a guy. If I'm the Marlins, I probably want him in the minors all year, get him 450 at bats or 500 plate appearances, whatever the number is. Live with the K's because I think the more he plays, he's going to narrow down that K rate enough. And he's going to have enough contact to be somebody that could really be an interesting piece. Like I said, that guys, not everyone, the ball just jumps off the bat like that. I know the raw power is a lot higher in the reports than the game power because sometimes you got to play a little differently because the game's on. You're not just hitting, batting practice balls over the building at Jupiter or someplace like that. But again, I think he might be a real interesting trade candidate, especially if they're in it and they're looking to add a piece and they feel they got depth in a position. Gerard could be that. But again, I think if this guy just played, you just play him and you don't get wrapped up in the daily highs and lows. You just see it play out. And then you just, once you have it locked in, like I said, he and Bleday are both 24, so it's not like he's 27. Right. I think Monte Harrison's getting close to 27. So that changes the dynamic a little bit. And like you noted, basically 2 years off. Let's see what happens with Gerard. But he's one of the more fascinating players in this system, in my opinion.
Yeah. All right, Joe. So I think, we've gone on here, pushing 35 minutes at this point, but touching on some of the big names. Obviously, we're not going to get to every Marlins prospect especially, with so many. I mean, Braxton Garrett looked really good today. For the Jumbo Shrimp, Griffin Conine is somebody that we probably need to talk about soon. So obviously we've got Khalil Watson and Yuri Perez and some of these other great players coming through the pipe. So we'll be back next week, next Wednesday, hopefully, to give another, Marlins prospect report. Again, this is a man on second, 5 reasons sports sort of combo. And if you're out there and you're watching this and you're thirsty and you're like, man, I need something new to drink out of, well, make sure you head over to dugoutmugs.com/manon2nd and get your hands on one of those really fun dugout mugs. Joe's got one there. I'm going to have mine soon. It's been a good day, Joe.
Oh yeah, and hey, and just one last thing before we close: if fans, you like what we're doing, hit the like button, please. Too, that helps us out. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe on the YouTube channel, and if you want us to talk about prospects, feel free to tweet us, and we'll look to run down some of those that you note as well. But again, great show, David. I think we're on to something fun here. We hope that everyone enjoyed it and carry us out, my friend.
All right, guys, we'll get to you next week. Make sure that you, like Joe said, like, subscribe, put on the notifications so that you know when the next one's coming. Have a good one, everybody.